Hello and welcome to the video lecture for Chapter 3 of the Human Relations textbook. So it's the 4th edition is Chapter 3, the 11th edition is Chapter 6 that covers problem solving and creativity. So let's start by talking about problem solving. So what is a problem exactly? A problem is a gap between what exists and what you want to exist. So maybe a problem exists in the form of you want excellent client compliance, but you're not getting it. Maybe the problem is you keep having expired drugs that you're wasting money on, but you don't want expired drugs that you're wasting your money on. So those are examples of problems in a vet clinic. Decision making is choosing one alternative from various alternative solutions. So decision making is a part of problem solving because we need to figure out a solution and then choose which solution we're going to go with. So lots of things go into problem solving here. There's a whole thought bubble web thing here that you can have a look at. We'll talk about each of these things separately though. So problem solving ability is influenced by characteristics and traits that are influential in problem solving and decision making. So, if you're able to improve some personal characteristics through conscious effort, you're going to be a better problem solver. So, typically, people that have a higher amount of education are better problem solvers. That's because they have a lot of background information to be able to make a judgment call on a decision or a problem. People with more training, same idea, right? You're going to have more experience with some problem solving. You're going to be able to problem solve better. And then self-discipline. Self-discipline has a big role in a lot of things. Some things we've talked about already, right? We talked about self-discipline being a part of motivation yesterday. And self-discipline is a part of problem solving as well. We need to be disciplined in evaluating our choices and making the right choice for our situation, as opposed to just diving right in and making the snap judgment choice. So, like I said, intelligent, well-educated, and well-experienced people end up making better decisions and better choices. So that's because they tend to have cognitive intelligence. So it's an intellectual or traditional type of intelligence that denotes the ability to solve problems. So cognitive intelligence is that like book smarts kind of thing, street smarts kind of thing, okay? Education provides a background of principles and facts, right? So people with a background of education have learned how to solve problems. They've learned critical thinking skills. They have principles and facts to fall back on, like standard operating procedures and things like that. And then, of course, experience as well helps you to make better decisions. If you face similar situations in the past, you probably have an idea of solutions that work or don't work. So experience can certainly contribute to the ability to make good decisions. So emotional intelligence is important in problem solving as well. EI, as opposed to IQ, is the ability to connect with people and understand their emotions. So people with that emotional intelligence have an effectiveness in managing their own feelings and reading the feelings of other people, and that helps them to make quality decisions. So if you have the ability to tap into your own feelings and kind of figure out what's going on within your emotions and figure out how other people are feeling as well, you can make decisions that help to balance those emotions among everyone. And then that way you can make decisions that benefit everyone as well. So intense emotions facilitate decision making, and that's true, right? Look at the world right now. There's so much anger going on with this Black Lives Matter movements, and we're seeing a lot of interesting changes at the society level. So that's an intense emotion of anger, of disappointment, of fear, and those things are making policy changes within our world. We saw intense emotions and a lot of decision making and changes happen when like 9/11 happened, right? We see huge increases in security in airports and things like that. A lot of that intense emotion is fear, right? And that definitely facilitated decision making and policy changes. So we want to look at flexibility versus rigidity. So someone that's flexible is open to new ideas and fresh outlooks. So flexibility is going to be a benefit when it comes to problem solving. People that are really, maybe you've heard the term stuck in their ways, old dogs can't learn new tricks, that kind of thing. Someone that's very rigid isn't going to be able to tap into as creative solutions for the problems. They think very one way and don't want to look at other outlooks. So we should, as a goal, avoid developing rigid viewpoints, right? We want to have an open mind, especially when looking at problem solving. Having flexibility enables problem solvers to think of original, creative, and alternative solutions. Someone with a very rigid mindset is going to see the one solution and not be able to look at anything else. So we want to maintain that open-mindedness. Intuition can be helpful with problem solving as well. So intuition is an experience-based way of knowing or reasoning. Intuition is also called a gut feeling. I have a gut feeling this isn't going to work, right? Sometimes you just have, like, you can look at something logically, right? And you can say, well, I mean, on paper, everything looks really good, but I just have a feeling that it's not going to really work, right? And that's happened to, many companies before, where they have an idea, they think it's going to work, they put out the idea and get a lot of backlash, right? So maybe they didn't follow their intuition, saying, I'm not sure that this is such a great idea. So we want to weigh and balance our evidence. Intuition does that kind of automatically and helps you kind of have a feeling one way or another. So there is an interplay here between knowing and sensing. So intuition can be looked at as experience or as feeling, right? So maybe you have experience in the area and you just have a feeling it won't work, right? The best use of intuition is to add past facts to deal with the situation along with your emotional hunch. So you want to weigh both. Sometimes you have an intuition in a negative way, but it doesn't necessarily, wouldn't necessarily play out that way. Sometimes fear kind of affects our intuition as well. I do feel like, though, there is value in that gut feeling, for sure. There have been many the times where I'm like, I just don't feel good about this, and it's turned out that I'm correct, right? So I think that intuition is definitely something to weigh in and balance into our decision-making process, but I wouldn't necessarily give intuition, like the driver's seat. I wouldn't let intuition make all my choices. So we can rely on our instincts when we are faced with a decision. So that's kind of using that intuition, using our education and experience to help make the choice. So stored information is the reorganized or repackaged information, right? So a good intuition develops over a long period because so much more information is stored. So typically intuition just gets better and better with time. And that makes sense, right? As children, how many dumb things do we do because we don't realize that that it's just not a very smart move, right? Jumping off the swings and breaking your leg or something. But the more experience you have, the more it kind of builds your intuition and you realize that that's not a good call. There is drawbacks, though. An analytical approach can often supply a better choice. So like I said, I think it's important to incorporate that intuition, but we don't want to make that the one and only thing we listen to. You can improve your intuition as well by getting feedback on past decisions, and that can improve your intuition method in the future, right? A lot of the time we're like, oh, I knew it. Like that hindsight's 20/20, right? You look back and you say, oh, I absolutely knew it. But how many times did you say to yourself, like, oh, this isn't going to be good, and then it was fine, right? So we tend to have a confirmation bias, which means that we pay more attention to the information that confirms what we thought as opposed to the information that refutes what we thought. Okay, so concentration is important in problem solving. I'm sure if you've ever, been working on an assignment or something, you get really into that flow, you're in the zone, right? That's why I offered to make that 7:15 meeting optional, because if you're in the zone, you often just don't want to step out of that and break that concentration. So being totally absorbed in your work is going to help you to be a better problem solver. You can really devote all your brain power to the problem. And when you're in that flow, things seem to just go right? You're just in the zone. And what happens then is you can often come to a good solution to a problem because you're really sitting down and focusing your brain on it. However, though, concentration can also, if you have a failure of concentration, it can affect your decision making as well. So if you're overtired and you're trying to concentrate and make a decision, often you're going to end up missing important parts of the choice that you have to make. So being tired, I read a study that's like being tired is like the equivalent of having like 4 beers or something and then driving. So being overtired is basically like being drunk. And how many good decisions do you make when you're drunk? Not very many. Okay, so indecisiveness is a fear of committing to any given course of action. I don't necessarily know what this fish or cut bait is supposed to mean. It's not in my 11th version of the textbook, so maybe you guys can enlighten me if you have the 4th and have read that. But I'm assuming it's similar to the my grandma's favorite statement of shit or get off the pot, right? It's like you got to make a choice, right? And sometimes you really need to just pick something. So indecisiveness is not necessarily a great quality. So a combination of indecision and perfectionism leads to procrastination. I know I find I'm a very indecisive person, and I think lots of people can be this way. Maybe you've heard of decision fatigue, and I think this happens a lot to people. It certainly happens to me. We live in a world that has so many options, so many things for sale. So let's say you make the decision, I need to purchase a new vehicle. Okay, so first you have to make the choice of like, is it going to be a car? Is it going to be a truck? Is it going to be a van? Is it going to be an SUV? So you have to pick what style you want. And then it's like, well, what manufacturer do you want? What make do you want? What trim level do you want? What color do you want, right? There's just too many choices. I really feel like decision fatigue, you just get to a point where you stop caring, and that's when the salesmen get you and they talk you up into the more expensive options, right? So indecisiveness in this regard doesn't really give you any benefits. It takes too long to make the decision, and you just feel like crippled in your ability to make that choice, right? I certainly prefer when I'm given like 2 to 3 options, because then I can see the best option, right? If I'm given like 15 choices, I'm like, I don't know. Well, I don't have the time or the energy to research all those choices. So typically, I just want either limited options, or I even like when sometimes just someone makes a choice for me. But that's I guess my own problem with decision fatigue. I find like as a mother, that's a huge thing for me, because it's like I have to decide what to make the kids for breakfast and lunch, and then my husband gets home, he's like, what should we make for dinner? And I'm like, don't ask me, just don't ask. I've had to make so many decisions all day about foods and snacks. I just like often feel like I can't get to the place of making a choice about dinner. Anyway, so moving on, this combination of indecision and perfectionism can lead to procrastination. So indecision is being unable to make the choice, and perfectionism is wanting to make the best choice, right? And then that's where we get to that place where we have decision fatigue and we procrastinate on making the choice. I'm definitely a procrastinator as well. Okay, so risk-taking and thrill-seeking, we talked about those types of personalities yesterday. We were talking about motivations, right? So some people that are real risk-taker or thrill-seekers, it could be advantageous for solving certain types of problems. So people that, can make that quick decision, sometimes they have like good intuition and they make good choices and they can go right ahead. But risk-taking, thrill-seeking people often make bad decisions too. How many, how many people have you seen like weaving in and out of traffic and cutting people off? They're probably risk takers, they're thrill seekers, right? And how many times does that lead to a crash, right? So they're not making a good problem solving or decision-making choice. So it's advantage for some types of problems because there are times when you do want to take that little bit more of a risk. Big risks can have big payoffs. We talked about that yesterday, right? So there are some advantage then to making kind of high risk choices. The experienced decision maker needs to know when those times are and then when we want to be a bit more conservative. So for instance, right now, the economy is kind of poor because of this pandemic situation. Maybe now's not the best time to quit your steady job, right? Because there might not be another job in your field for you, right? So we need to be able to make decisions, yes, risky decisions sometimes, but we need to balance when it's appropriate to take that risk. If you have a tendency to focus on avoiding loss, that means that you're risk averse. You don't want to take the risk. I would say I am pretty risk averse. So problem solving, continued. Values are going to influence your decision making as well. So we want to make sure we have the right values for the situation to improve our decision, because the wrong values are going to lead to a poor decision. If you're decision making for an entire company, let's say you have like a bonus to give out or something, and you decide to give yourself the bonus and not give any of the people working hard on the ground level the bonus, that's a poor decision, right? You have your values wrong. You're prioritizing yourself over the team. So that's going to lead to a poor decision that's going to have some backlash. Oh God, look at this sentence. Pursuit of excellence with only one L. I feel like if you're going to write about excellence, you need to make sure you're spelling it right. Anyway, the pursuit of excellence significantly influences decision making because it means that you're being more conscientious about the choices that you make. This is going to result in a high quality alternative solution, right? We want to make the best choices we can. Let's see. So, problem solving and decision making steps. The first step is to just be aware that there is a problem, right? If you don't know that there's an issue, you don't know how to solve it, certainly, because you don't even know it's there. Then we want to identify the causes of the problem. So we're kind of looking at critical thinking here right now, being aware, identifying the causes. Then we'd like to do a little bit of creative thinking by finding creative alternatives. That's a great time to start doing some brainstorming. So brainstorming is most effective if you have more than one person because you can feed off of each other in the brainstorming process, right? One person might have an idea, the second person can build off it, and back and forth until you find a really great alternative. Brainstorming is only going to be effective, though, if all ideas are considered good ideas, or at least potential ideas. They're not all going to be good. But if let's say we're at a table, all of our class is all at a table, and we're trying to come up with some brainstorming ideas. And one of you suggests something, and I say, oh, no, that's stupid. We're not going to talk about that. And then who else has an idea? Are you going to feel like you want to suggest your idea? Probably less so, because you don't want to be shot down the way that other person was, right? So when we are in a brainstorming space, it needs to be like a safe space. Yes, not all ideas are going to be great, but we're not going to shoot them down in the brainstorming initial times, because that's going to shut off a lot of our creativity, right? Not all ideas are going to be good, but mistakes can really lead to good ideas, right? So once you've brainstormed some ideas and come up with alternatives, you need to weigh those alternatives and make the choice as to which one is the best decision. Then we're going to implement the choice. And your decision-making, problem-solving steps are never complete until you've done the last step of evaluating your choice. If you evaluate the choice and it's not working out, you need to go right back to the beginning and try to start over again in figuring out what's going on here. Sometimes you think you've identified the cause of the problem, you brainstorm ways to fix that problem and implement it, but the problem remains. Maybe you just didn't find the right cause the first time, okay? So we want to go right back to the beginning and repeat if necessary. So these steps are similar to the scientific method, if you remember talking about that way back in high school, and these do contribute to critical thinking. There's an orderly flow of steps. If you take too much deviation from those steps, you're going to result in decision failure. So maybe you didn't bother searching for alternative solutions, you just went with the first one that came up, and that one's just not the best choice. So you want to stick to those steps. Also, we need to be careful that we are exercising rationality in our decision making. Emotion and personality traits can cloud the process. Sometimes you just don't like a person. That's not a good reason to shut down their ideas. Sometimes people have like really big egos and they don't want to set that ego aside and like listen to someone else's idea over theirs, but that doesn't help the decision making process either. So we want to be careful of our emotions and personality traits. When you're having a big emotion, it's helpful to think of emotions as just like amplified thought, right? So really think, what am I thinking in the moment? Am I feeling like angry about this choice? Why is that? And try to think of what other things are going on in your brain at the time, and that can kind of help you realize if your decision-making process is becoming blurred because of those emotions. So identifying causes of the problem, there are 5 key elements to question in business. Is it a personnel problem? Is it something to do with the people that are working there? Are they not trained properly? Do they have attitude problems? Are they unable to complete the job properly? The next question is materials. So do you have the right tools for the job? Do you have the right supplies for the job? Machines and facilities. So again, do you have the correct machinery? Do you have the correct equipment set up for the job in question? What about the physical environment? So especially in the vet clinic, we talked about a lot of those safety things. Physical environment can affect our job performance a lot, right? We talked about there being a lot of noise in the vet clinic. I'm not sure about you guys, but I find in a really noisy environment, I kind of, like my brain stops working as well. I just feel like it almost feels more frantic and like fragmented. So I have a harder time focusing. So that can be really tricky when you've just got like that incessant barking and beeping and whatever going on in the background. Also, we work in an environment where we have a lot of drugs and chemicals. So maybe there's fumes in the air that aren't being exhausted from the building properly, so that's affecting. So physical environment's one area to look at as well. And then methods. So is there standard operating procedures? Are people following them? Do people need more training? So those are good things to ask when we're focusing in on a problem. So I have a little fishbone diagram here as well, if you find that helpful. That's basically just the things that we talked about. So it's really great if we can come up with creative solutions to our problems because we can end up often having a really good breakthrough with those. So the more alternatives that are generated, the more likely you are to find an appropriate solution. So it says your innovation is a numbers game, and it's true. The more things you come up with, the more likely you are to get to a better place. If you're like, who has an idea? I have an idea. Yep, let's go with that very first one. Is the likelihood of that very first idea being the best one very strong? Not really. Usually the further you go, the better you can build off those solutions. So we want to weigh all our alternatives when we're looking at our brainstorming. We can examine pros and cons. Pros and cons lists can be a really helpful way of evaluating our possible solutions. But we would like to avoid over-analyzing. And underneath there it says analysis paralysis, right? I'm sure we've all experienced this too, where you're just like, I feel, you're like researching a new, I don't know, TV to buy or something, and you have read all these things and all the reviews, and you're like, I just don't know which one's going to be the best one. That's analysis paralysis. So ideally, we would like to reduce the number of possible choices by eliminating ones that we just know aren't right off the bat. We don't need to bother analyzing those ones, and then we can just focus on the ones that feel like possible solutions. So as I stated already, problem solving is not complete until after you've implemented your decision, you've evaluated your decision. That can take time because the results of decisions aren't always immediately apparent. So you don't want to say, okay, I made the decision, here's the new decision, and then introduce it, and then the next day be like analyzing if it's worked. It's a good idea to give things a couple weeks to see if the problem is going away. If the evaluation of the decision is negative, so your solution did not work, then you want to begin that process again and go right back to the beginning. It's a good idea to know what your worst case scenario is, right? So if we implement this solution, what's the worst that could happen? And it's a good idea to make sure you have an exit strategy. So if you do have a bad decision, how do you back out of it? And it's a good quality, I guess, to be able to recognize when a decision has gone bad. I've been reading, you just see a lot of stuff. I saw like a quote about that, which I thought was really good. And it's like, get comfortable with changing your opinion when you've gotten more information, right? So even though maybe you were the champion of a decision and it turned out to not be the best one, it's okay to be wrong on that and to make the choice to backtrack or to come up with a new solution. It's our egos that get in the way when we just like double down on a bad choice. And that's a great way for to lose your job or go out of business. So if you feel like you're not a great problem solver, there are techniques that you can do that can enhance your ability. And they're fun techniques, I think. And that's like brain teasers, right? If we can build our brain power, we can build our problem solving power. So things like crossword puzzles, some types of video games like your puzzle type games, word puzzles, number puzzles, rebuses, and 3-dimensional puzzles. So working on those kind of brain games, right, really can enhance your problem solving ability. So let's talk about creative workers. Creativity is a really valuable skill to have. I think people that are creative are invaluable on a team. So creativity doesn't just mean that you can paint a pretty picture or, you're really good at interpretive dance or something. Creativity often tends to be linked with the arts, right? So people think that creative people are maybe writers or painters or artists, but their creativity falls into a lot of fields, right? So like builders are creative. They can come up with new ways to build things. Scientists are creative, right? Coming up with new theories, testing those theories. All those things are creativity, right? So creativity, they define here as the ability to develop good ideas that can be put into action. So a flash of insight of a solution to the problem. Now, when we say like flash of insight, that almost makes it feel like it's random, doesn't it? Some people get the flash and some people don't, right? Maybe you're thinking right now, I don't think I'm very creative. I never ever do any drawing or anything like that. I'm not very creative. Well, I have some good news for you. Even if you feel like you're not creative, creativity is a learned skill. So I think this is really fascinating. I studied this when I studied psychology, but there was a study done with children that were encouraged to be creative, and then they were tested against a group that were encouraged to be think inside the box. So groups of children were given toy blocks and were asked to build structures. So one group of children was rewarded every time they built something that looked a certain way, like maybe let's say that looked like a house or a building. So they were only rewarded for things that looked like buildings. So the children just continued to build things that looked like buildings. The other group was encouraged to be creative. And the way they were encouraged to be creative is that they were only rewarded if they built something novel. So something that looked different than they had done before. And those children kept putting out more and more creative and different products. So I think that's really interesting that we can train our brains to be creative by rewarding that creativity. So we may feel like we're kind of stuck in the box thinking, or that we can't come up with new ideas. But if you really allow yourself the freedom to make a mistake, to come up with an idea that's bad, those bad ideas might lead to good ideas if we reward ourselves for thinking about something new or coming up with a new idea. So creativity is learned. I think I definitely feel that way. I like to quilt. That's something I like to do, is sewing and quilting. So when I first got started, I would always follow patterns, right? Because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I kind of started from the bottom and followed a pattern and worked my way up. And now I'm quite happy to just kind of fiddle with things and make something new out of my brain. So that's something that was learned, right? I didn't say, hey, I think I'm going to learn quilting and then just come up with my own thing, right? So sometimes we just might not be there yet when it comes to creativity. We just haven't learned and gotten to that place yet, but we can encourage ourselves. So I do encourage you. One of the things that people list as a part of a job that makes them feel very validated or fulfilled in their job is being able to be creative. So even if you think that isn't something you value, you could still build that skill. So creativity is helpful at any stage, but it's especially helpful for being aware of problems, figuring out what the cause is, and searching for alternative solutions. So creativity is helpful kind of all along the way. Do you see that? In the problem-solving steps. So creative workers tend to have different intellectual and personality characteristics, as in they tend to be more mentally flexible. And remember, this is something that you can learn, right? So what are the characteristics of a creative worker? Creative workers tend to have knowledge. And if they don't have the knowledge, they tend to want to get the knowledge, right? They have intellectual abilities, as in that they can process that knowledge and do critical thinking with it. And they tend to have a little bit more of an outgoing or bubbly personality, a more creative personality. But again, I stress this to you, you can learn that. So in order to be creative, we need that background knowledge. So you're going to need a broad background of the information about the problem, including facts and observations. This knowledge is the building blocks for generating and combining ideas. And it gives you lots of building blocks to combine things in new and different ways, right? The more information we have about a problem, the better we can solve it because we have more choices. People that are creative tend to be bright rather than brilliant. So, someone that's brilliant is like a real genius, whatever. People that are bright are pretty on the ball. They can figure things out, but they don't necessarily have to be like genius level. They are able to generate alternative solutions in a short period of time. And the key to that is insight. Insight helps you to know what information is relevant. It helps you find connections between the old and the new. It helps you combine unrelated facts, and it helps you to see the big picture. Have you ever heard the term, you can't see the forest for the trees? It's like where you're just lost in the details. It really pays to kind of zoom out and try to see that big picture as well, and that's that insight. So creative workers maintain a youthful curiosity, and it's not centered just exclusively in the area of your expertise. So this is especially true in clinic. If there's something you don't know about, look it up, learn some more, right? There's always something to learn in vet medicine, and that's something I love about this field because I do really, truly value curiosity and learning. Having a wide range of interests, because that just gives you more of that knowledge and background information. The more areas that you know a little bit about, the more overall knowledge you have, right? People that are creative get enthusiastic about any type of puzzle. I would totally agree with that. Anytime there's something that needs to be figured out in clinic, I'm like excited. If you have the ability to think divergently, thinking about things in separate ways, and then knowing when to think convergently, so as the big picture. Creative workers have a mix of fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. So fluid intelligence is defined as a raw processing ability. During that time, you have information learned and problem solved quickly. This is more present in younger people, so it's declining by age 30. Luckily for us over 30s, we develop crystallized intelligence, which is the knowledge that you've accumulated with time. And that obviously is going to increase with age and experience. So young people learn faster and think faster, but older people have that, that learned wisdom where you have that accumulation of the things that you've learned. So creativity occurs when these three components are all together, when you have expertise, creative thinking skills, and the right type of motivation. The most creative people are motivated primarily by satisfaction and the challenge of the work itself. And I would agree absolutely. Anytime I have a creative project to work on, just coming up with the ideas and seeing them in action is so rewarding. So there's 5 external conditions that can foster your creativity. So an environmental need, right? Have you ever heard necessity is the mother of invention, right? So if you need something, you will figure out a way to solve that problem. There needs to be some conflict and tension. So if there's just maybe a little bit of muttering about an issue, maybe it won't become something that we're talking about. But as there's more conflict and tension rising, we're going to need to come up with creative solutions. I think we're living this right now with these Black Lives Matters protests, right? There's certainly this feeling of people saying, look, we've had enough, right? So now we're starting to see some kind of creative problem solving, new ways of looking at social order and stuff, which is very interesting to me. And then encouragement, right? That permissive atmosphere, rewarding yourself for those creative thoughts, like the children in that experiment. And humor as well, right? Having a good laugh, laughter is the best medicine kind of thing, right? So if you are able to interject humor, it can often help with that creativity, because humor raises positive feelings, and positive feelings raise creativity. And then time pressure to a degree. I would say a realistic time pressure. When you have a bit of a time crunch, that can be really motivating. But when you're working with way too short a time, it can be creativity crushing, actually. So to improve your creativity, make sure you're concentrating intensely on the task at hand. It's hard to be creative when you're also checking your Facebook and trying to write an assignment or something. So focus in on what you're doing. I definitely find this when I'm trying to build course content for you guys, if my children are around and yakking at me, I'm like, oh my God, I just can't focus. I can't do anything well. But when I have time to just sit and work and get in the zone, I can really, I feel make some decent stuff. We want to overcome traditional mental sets. What does that mean? So a mental set is a typical way of thinking about something. I'm trying to think of an example here. So let's say so here's the difference, I think, between someone with creativity and someone without, right? So if you ever watch cooking shows, maybe you've seen where they do mystery box challenges, and they'll give you let's say, flour and sugar and eggs and some type of fruit or something. And most people end up making cupcakes or a muffin, but the truly creative person is I made a dessert pasta. And you're what?
That's thinking outside the box, basically, is overcoming traditional mental sets. So thinking laterally is a creative way of thinking. Thinking laterally means that you are open to a wide array of problems or solutions. If you think vertically, would be the opposite of thinking laterally. That's like a really rational way of thinking where this solution meets this solution meets this, and you just build on that one. You don't think of other possible solutions that might be on the sidelines. Conducting brainstorming sessions improves creativity. And like I said, we need to be brainstorming typically in groups of 2 or more. And we want to make sure those brainstorming sessions are very permissive at first so that we can throw out all the ideas and maybe be able to hit on one really good one. Even if all the rest are terrible, if we get that one good one, it was an amazing brainstorming session. And if you establish idea quotas. So a quota is like a minimum amount of something you want to have. So if you say, okay, well, you need to think of at least 4 ideas. I want 4 ideas from everyone at the brainstorming session. That forces you to get more creative. So one of the suggestions is to engage in multicultural experiences. And I think that can certainly be helpful because different cultures have different ways of looking at things. But I would caution you here to avoid just like straight up cultural appropriation, right? We don't want to just go in and steal ideas from people or take stuff from other cultures and call them our own. We can certainly be inspired and build off of ideas, but we shouldn't be like just stealing stuff from other cultures. So you can obtain direct access to novel ideas and concepts from other cultures, right? Like different places look at, maybe concepts of time, etc., in different ways. And we do talk about this in a later chapter. So maybe you can look at how, businesses run in, let's say, Switzerland and say, oh, hey, that's an interesting way of doing it. I feel like that would benefit my business here. People recognize the same surface behavior has different functions and implications. So again, just the way we look at things or the way we do things in different cultures can have different implications or, end results. And sometimes it can shake up thinking enough to access unconventional knowledge when back in our own culture. It can lead to psychological readiness to recruit ideas from unfamiliar sources and places. So that just basically means it can open up your mind to new ideas. And it can foster a willingness to synthesize seemingly incompatible ideas for diverse cultures. So if you're seeing different things, from different cultures and able to bring them together in a way that's new and a novel idea. So how do we improve in creativity? We can obtain adequate physical exercise. I thought this was really interesting because I think I'm kind of a lazy person. I'm not really big on exercise. So physical movement stimulates your brain because your brain gets more blood and oxygen. Exercise can also help to reduce stress, and it can enhance the activity of the frontal lobe of the brain, which is the functional area for abstract reasoning and intention. So I thought that was all really interesting. I've never really thought of it before, that like maybe going for a walk or going for a jog could spark creativity and really get those, the brain juices flowing. I thought that was really interesting. That's something I hadn't thought of before. And then lastly, we can play a little game with ourselves by taking on different roles. So our first role would be the explorer. So the explorer is the person that's going to look for maybe causes of the problem, areas that we can improve, that kind of thing. And then you want to play the artist. And the artist is the one that's coming up for those creative solutions. So coming up with different ideas that might solve the problem. Then you can be the judge and evaluate all the different solutions you've come up with and be able to see which ones are better than others. And then lastly, you can achieve results by playing the role of the lawyer. So arguing your case and trying to actively get your solution into power, into play. Okay, so that is our lecture for chapter 3. Let's talk about our journal prompt for today. So I tried to give you a bit of a practical one in the vet clinic today. So we're going to focus on critical thinking and creative problem solving. Oh, I wanted to show you actually, so critical thinking. Our slides don't really go into it, but I wanted to show you this from our, this is the 11th edition chapter book, or textbook, sorry, chapter book, oh my gosh. So critical thinking is something that's an important skill to have. It's not necessarily taught in like traditional school, so I wanted to highlight it here for you. So critical thinking is part of problem solving and decision making. And it's an important, like I said, it's an important skill to have. So the very first step of critical thinking is making sure you have a healthy degree of skepticism about an argument or position or proposition. So we want to look for logic flaws in the argument, or see if the person's emotional state might have made them have a differing opinion, okay? So a healthy dose of skepticism is important in critical thinking. Then we're going to identify and evaluate the assumptions in the argument. So you want to look and see sorry, I'm just distracted here. You want to look and see what assumptions might be being made that are kind of contributing to that argument. And then if you're able to, you want to kind of debunk them, right? Because assumptions aren't always going to be true. And then you want to consider alternative arguments or other solutions. And then lastly, the last step is to make the decision. But I wanted to just highlight that being skeptical and identifying the assumptions. Those are really important when we're looking at critical thinking. So our journal prompt for today, we're going to do a little bit of that. So some background. Pet obesity is a concern in veterinary medicine, one that has the potential to negatively affect the animals that we care for. I'm sure you guys have seen this. Anytime I go for a walk, like I feel like 90% of the pets I walk by, I'm like, holy God, that dog is fat. So lots of pet owners do not realize that some of their behaviors might be causing the obesity, or they might not realize that by changing their behaviors, they might be able to improve their pet's health. So the problem's further complicated by the fact that many pet owners might be overweight themselves, so they might be hesitant to enter into the discussion about weight loss. And then lastly, owners may have experience with weight loss programs either for themselves or their pets, which were unsuccessful and are hesitant to participate because of that. So I think a lot of those factors are certainly true. There are a lot of obese people. There's a lot of people, obese or not, that have engaged in dieting or weight loss, which I think across the board, I think the stat is 95% fail long term. So they might just not want to even start that conversation. So let's use our critical thinking skills to identify a few things. So we want to identify owner behaviors that contribute to pet obesity and why they might engage in those behaviors. So for instance, like overfeeding, why would people maybe overfeed their animals, right? So get creative and use your critical thinking to think about what owners do and why they do it. Let's think about why or what might be holding an owner back from participating in weight loss programs and why. And then what causes owners to stop complying with a program and why? So if they start a weight loss program and then stop, why would that be? And then what might feel motivating to the owner to continue with a program? So as with our previous journal prompts, there aren't really right or wrong answers here. I'm looking for you to just think critically. I tried to pick a topic that you could probably think of without having a lot of, we haven't really discussed obesity yet in class, but I think that's okay. I think looking at owner behaviors and stuff like that, I think we can look at without having that background knowledge. That being said, right, play the explorer. Feel free to do some research on this topic as well to look into it. That's part of creative thinking. That's part of creative problem solving, is doing the research, seeing what stuff is out there to help you make those decisions. So after you've done that critical thinking and identified those 4 things, so write about those. Then we're going to use creative problem solving to develop ideas to implement a weight loss program in your hospital. We want the weight loss program to support pet owners to manage obesity in their pets. So ideally, we want a program that does a few things here. We want to draw attention to the potential problem of obesity in a welcoming way. So for instance, like the owners that are overweight themselves and hesitant to enter into the discussion, we don't want to turn them off, right? So one way is avoiding kind of like hot buzzwords like fat, even obese, often can be a bit of a triggering word for people that are already or that feel that they are obese as well. We want to have a program that encourages owners to participate. We want to help the owners to stay motivated to continue with the program. So we would like to increase client compliance. So client compliance is the word for people doing what we ask them to do. And then we would like to have some type of reward system for meeting goals. Okay. So that is our journal prompt for today. I think it might be a little bit of a bigger one to tackle, but I think you guys got this, okay? So using your creative thinking, identify those 4 points, and then creative problem solving, we can figure out ideas for a program here, okay? You do not have to have a totally organized approach to this weight loss program idea. I am totally open to here a few ideas I have that might draw attention. Here are a few ideas I have for a reward system. And then maybe just highlight ones that you think might be better than others, okay? So that's everything I wanted to talk about for today's video lecture. If you do have any questions, please reach out in the chat or via email or ask in the virtual classroom. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.